Hello class, this week we're going to take a look at HTML documents and how we can build them and create them using the HTML hypertext markup language tags and elements. As we discussed last week, HTML is the backbone of a web document. It provides the structure and the content, where later on when we look at CSS and JavaScript, we add the styling and the logic. This recording follows along with the week 2 section in our zyBook. So, if we start out with section 2.1, we follow along, and the most important thing to pick out of this chapter is the structure of a document. And I'm going to follow along in this slideshow that I've created. As you can see, it does follow along with what is in the chapter in the textbook. So an HTML document is constructed with elements. A single element in an HTML document is comprised of tags. And some tags do have attributes and extra values. So in essence, an HTML document is a text document comprised of tags, attributes, and values. And you can see on the screen here, the P tag has an opening and a closing. We have our start P and our end P. We have our content, which was the text of good day, and our closing tag, the /P. So each tag has an opening and a closing. Now, not all tags have closing tags. Some tags, like the image tag, which we're going to take a look at in a little later in a few slides, does not have a closing tag. And you can see down here on the A tag, the anchor tag. The anchor tag has an attribute name and a value to tell you what its destination is. In this case, if you've ever clicked on a link in a web page, you've clicked on an A tag, an anchor tag. Also described here in the examples, we have a strong tag. A strong tag makes the text a bolder font. And the P tag is a paragraph tag, which wraps a paragraph of text. Next, in chapter 2.2, we talked about the quantity of tags. There are quite a few tags in HTML, over 130 different kind of elements that are available for us to use. We're not going to look at all 130 in this class, but we are going to look at quite a few of them. The strongest, most widely used building blocks of HTML. We'll dig into some of the details. So, as we discussed prior, an HTML tag is an instruction, a markup instruction as part of the language. And it's identified by the less than and the greater than sign surrounding the tag name. So again, if we look at the strong tag here, the strong tag is surrounded by the less than and the greater than signs and the word strong. So we have that's how we identify a tag. The opening tag indicates the starting point for that piece of code. The closing tag has the / in front of it with the same name to end the tag. And all the text, all the information that follows between those two pieces is controlled by what the tag is meant to do. Now you can have tags inside of tags, so you can nest tags to build upon the functionality. And we'll see some examples of that later. For example, we can create a paragraph tag with some text, and inside that paragraph tag we can emphasize some other text with an EM tag, or we can emphasize other text with a strong tag to bold it. Now, as a little aside, as we go back into our zyBook, we'll see that in section 2.3 they have something here called an HTML sandbox. And what the HTML sandbox is, if I click into it, it's basically just a little editor where you can try different HTML functions. It's a play area, it's a sandbox. So you can put your code in once it loads up, and it gives you some test code to start with. And you can see we've got some tags in here, we've got some text, we've got an ending, here's the ending tags over here on the right. And if you do click run, and we scroll down a little bit, the web page is being rendered. So here we have our heading, and here are our paragraph text that matches up with this. So here's our heading, here's our title, And here's our paragraph text. Additionally, since I don't want you to always have to go remember where the sandbox is in week 2, especially when we get to further weeks, I've created down here in chapter 17 a CST 161 test area, which essentially has the same thing. It's called IDE-coding rooms. In these labs, we're using a specific IDE based on a coding rooms implementation. And as you can see, it's the same kind of structure, maybe a little bit different text on the inside, and it's another place where you can use and test your code. So going back to our main page, and we'll go back to our presentation here. So we're going to start looking at some tags next and what their different functionality is and how you can use them to build documents. Okay, so moving on. The first tag we're looking at is called the HTML tag. Oddly enough, HTML tag is the indicator that tells us what the start of an HTML document is. So it identifies what it is and what is going to follow. The HTML tag usually has some major pieces built into it, the heading tag and the body tag. We'll take a look at those in a few minutes. Another tip, always include the doc type HTML before HTML to declare what HTML5 is. HTML5 is the HTML markup language, HTML language version 5. So it's the most recent version as of this class. Essentially, this is just telling the browser when it finally does get the document off the web server, what kind of document it is and how to interpret it. Essentially, that's what all the HTML tags are. A way to tell a browser or other device how to interpret the data that is coming below or following the tags, wrapped in the tags. So now we talk about the head tag. The head tag gives us some information, mostly to the browser. This gives us a way to identify specific page titles, like the title tag will say my page. So when you look at the tab in the browser, it'll give you that is the title that will be displayed. The meta tag is identifying what character set is being used. In this case, we're using UTF-8. UTF stands for Universal Character Set. So it's a universal way of identifying what the characters are and how the browser will go and interpret them. So UTF stands for Unicode Transformation Format. There are various different iterations of UTF. We're using the -8 version, an 8-bit implementation, and this got very specific rules. So your browser will be able to understand what UTF-8 is, and if there's any issues with the characters that may be confusing without specifying UTF-8, the specifying of the UT8 clarifies what the different character sets would look like, and will make your document much more readable. So in the heading section, this is always two great pieces of information to include. A note, any text other than the title, which is displayed in the browser's tab, is not displayed on the web page. It is informational only and for the browser to interpret and be able to process your web page properly. Okay, next up we have the body tag. Now the body tag is what you do see on your web page. Everything that you are going to want to display and show to the user is going to go inside the body tag. So inside this body tag we have two pieces. We have an H1 tag, which is a heading, and a P tag, which is a paragraph. So if I take this text and I copy it, and I'm going to bring it back over to our sandbox. Actually, I'm going to bring it down to our test area instead. And once it loads, I will paste it in there. And we will try running it to see what it looks like. And we'll probably do that with all the tags coming up, just so you have a working example of everything. So I'm going to replace the body tag with the welcome. I am going to remove the script from the script tag for now. We don't really need that for this example. I am going to line up the text for readability. And there we go. Actually, this should be indented a little more. There, much more readable, easy to understand. So we have our head tag, which displays the title, basic web page, and we have our body tag, which has the heading and the text that's going to be displayed in the browser. Now, another neat thing, as you can see, is when you hover over the different pieces, the different tags, you will get some information. Sometimes it might be helpful, sometimes maybe not, but it does also give you a link to additional information. So, we put our body tag into our document and we click Run. And once it finishes running, we'll scroll down and we will take a look at our output. And here it is. Let me give it a little more room so we can see it. There we go. So here's the welcome tag, your H1, and this is the paragraph tag. This is my website. Okay. Going back to our slide deck, let's move on to the paragraph tag. Well, we just talked about the paragraph tag. Paragraph tag is used to define blocks of text as paragraphs, and it's useful for separating code into readable sections. Something to note, browsers automatically add spacing before and after paragraph tags. So you'll notice if we added a second paragraph, and I'll do that here, this is another paragraph. Oops, I can't spell paragraph. There we go. P, return. Now, if we take a look, here is our text. Note I did not need to run the lab a second time. As I make the changes in the code, it is automatically rendered in our web view. So you can see here's our display with the extra spacing built into the output. So again, the paragraph tag, good for putting in blocks of text, and browsers will add spacing around a paragraph tag. Next, we have a section tag. A section tag is another way of grouping elements of a web page, and you can see we have a section tag here wrapped with a heading and a paragraph. It mostly just helps with accessibility and SEO. SEO is search engine optimization, so when Google tries to, or anybody tries to analyze your web page, and so we can put it in a search engine, this will help that out. When using section tags, this might be a good time to start using the different H tags, the H1 for heading 1 or H2 for heading 2. Think of a table of contents in a book where you would have H1 be the table of contents, and H2 would be the next section, and H3 could be a subsection after that. Just for an example, think back to our syllabus document. Here it is over here. If you take a look, you can consider this an H1 tag, which would be contents, and each of these would be H2 tags. Followed down here, these could be H3 tags. So you could see you could structure your document into different sections to make it much more readable and understandable. And again, searchable, because ultimately you want people to find your web pages and use them. Okay, since we started to talk about headings, here are some heading tags. H1 is the main tag, and H2 is for subsections, and it goes all the way down to H6. Preferably, you should only have one H1 tag per page, and H2 through H6 for different structures of your document, similar to what we just saw over here in the syllabus. Next, we have some text formatting, the EM tag for emphasis, and the cite tag for referencing works and like references, like book footnotes. So I'm going to take this code and I am going to put it into our test area so we can see how it looks. And I am going to put it inside this tag. Oops, I guess I did not copy it properly. Let me do that again. Copy. And let's go back and paste that in there. Give ourselves some more room to work. And let's paste that back in. Right there. There we go. Oh, we have an extra tag. Let's clean up the tags a little bit. And there we go. So we have a opening P tag. We have an EM tag for emphasis embedded inside the P tag. We have the site, the Great Gatsby, also embedded inside a P tag. So let's see what that looks like. So here is your emphasis on important, and here is your site tag. Not too much of a difference between the two, as you can see. And honestly, the site tag is not that often used. EM is used much more. The image tag. So the image tag is essentially what it is. It allows us to display images on our website. So the image tag has attributes. This is the first one we're seeing with attributes. In this particular example, we have 3 different attributes. The SRC attribute, which tells us where the image is. Now this is the path to where the image can be found. In this particular case, it's showing us a path on the local web server. It could be a URI to another document on somewhere on the internet. And we have the company logo in the alt attribute. The alt attribute is used for accessibility and tooltips. So when we hover over it, we can see it, say it, and see what it is. Yeah, so if the image doesn't work for whatever reason, the image is broken or the image is missing, we can still get some text to identify what should be there. And then the width tag, the width attribute is simply the width of the image. So let's see if we can put our image tag into our test document. And I will take it and I will put it right underneath the site tag. And if I scroll in and I take a look, there's no image. Where is our image? Our image does not exist. Well, that's because we do not have a correct source. Okay, so let's put in a better address for a better image, and you can see we don't have an image here. Let's put in an address for an image, and this one I will pick off of our Suffolk website, and this should render down below as the Suffolk logo. So there, we now can put in a link to a image on the internet and have it displayed in our web page. Great. Going back to, well, let's go back here for a second. I just wanted to point out that the image width we set was 200. So if we change that, let's say we make it 300, you see it scales and gets a little bit bigger. So we can adjust the image size as well. Okay, moving on. The A tag, the anchor tag. The anchor tag gives us the ability to build in a link in our document to another document. So I will copy that text and I will place it into our testing window here. I will build, I'll put it above the image. I will build a link and I will have it go to, instead of example.com, I will have it go to SUNY Suffolk. And I will adjust the text to say, visit SUNY Suffolk. And if we scroll down, here is our link here, and you could see that it will take us to that website when I click on it, and I will do so now. And it does not like that. It's probably because we're trying to do it from this IDE here, but that's okay. You get the gist of it. We can put other links in there. I needed www in front of it. Let's just test that out to make sure. Nope, same issue. Okay, so you can put it in there. We can use other testing methods later to simulate these links. For now, this is how you would build the link to a different website. Okay. Again, this tag has an attribute, the href. Href is the indicator of where we want to go next. Optionally, and this is kind of neat, if you wanted to, instead of clicking on the link show up in the current tab, have it show up in a new tab, you can use this target attribute and set it equal to quote _ blank quote. It will create a new tab with whatever href target you have specified. Lists. So lists are ways that you can, well, display a list onto the screen. There are two types of lists, the UL, the unordered list, and OL, the unordered lists. UL are the bullets, and OL are numbered. So let's copy both lists and put that into our code. I'm going to remove some of this only because it's getting a little crowded. So let's make it less crowded. So we'll put our lists, the UL and OL in there. And I'm going to have to rerun it because it looks like the page has stopped rendering properly. Actually, it looks like it's completely stopped running, so I'm going to reload this page altogether. And click resume because it wants me to click resume. And let's see what happens after it reloads. We should hopefully be back in business. A little slow today, apparently, but that's okay. Okay, so here's our page. It saved where we were. So that's the great thing about these labs, is that it automatically saves what we're doing. And I'll click run. And it'll start the web server. And in a second or two, we'll have our code being displayed. And then finally, we can take a look at the lists. So here are our lists. Here are our unordered lists with the bullets and the ordered lists with the numbers. To specify a new item in your list, you use the li tag. And I will add in a new one. Let's see, apples, bananas, and we'll put in oranges, why not? Li. And you can see it makes a new bullet with oranges. Interesting how there is a space after the first two, between the first two, and not the others. That's interesting why it's doing that. There's no reason for that. They should be the same. Okay, well, we'll take a look at that later on in the class as we get into more troubleshooting methods and what we can look at to figure out what's going on. But for now, I just want you to understand how the tags work. I wonder if I cut them out and I put them all back in, does it change the way it looks? No, it does the same thing. It's very interesting. Okay. All right, well, moving on, we'll take a look at that at another time and try to understand a little more why things display the way they display. Next, we have tables. Tables are a great way of organizing data. Tables have multiple tags. We start with the table tag to indicate that we're going to build a table. Then we have a TR tag for a table row. So each row in your table will need its own TR tag. The TH tag is the header for that table. So typically in a table, the first row is always the headings. And then for every row of data after that, you would have your TRs with the TD, the table data. So let's copy all this into our test window, and we'll put it under the lists, and we'll see what that looks like. So here's our table. We have our headers, we have our data. And there it is. See how the headers are put in bold and everything's organized in rows. So we can put in additional columns as we need. Let's see, what could we put in there? We'll put in state, where this person lives. And we'll put in here, and you can see if we don't have a TD, it will not populate it, it will not adjust it, it'll keep everything lined up nice and neat. If we put in another TD, and we'll put in New York. And there it is, it rendered it and it adjusted it accordingly. So there, you can build tables of data as well. Now, tables of data are great for representing data. CSS really comes into play with tables to make them look fancy and readable and pleasant to the eye. And next we have, actually this is the last slide, we have some special characters. Sometimes in programming languages, characters are reserved for specific things, specifically in HTML, the tags. Tags are surrounded by the less than and greater than sign. So if you wanted to display a less than or greater than sign in your code, you can't just put in a less than sign because the HTML interpreter thinks that's the start of a tag. So instead you would use this ampersand LT semicolon. Similarly, if you wanted to use a greater than sign, you would use ampersand GT semicolon, and that would display a greater than sign. So let's see what that looks at. And I'm going to put it more up top, just so we don't have to keep scrolling to the bottom. And I will put in a P here. P, and this is a less than sign. Ampersand LT semicolon. /P. And we'll wait for this to render, and there it is. Something also to note as we wrap up here for today, you see I have lots of carriage returns and all sorts of stuff in here, but you'll note that my output did not change. That is because this is what we call white space. The spaces and tabs and returns that are added to the document to make it readable for us, but not necessary for the computer. The interpreter is reading only what is surrounded by tags. So that is how it's determining what to display. All this extra stuff here, like lines 10 to 12 and 14 to 16, those are ignored. They are not necessary. They are just for us as humans to be able to read them and interpret them. So going back to our list of tags, we have a few other ones. If we wanted to display an ampersand, we would use ampersand AMP semicolon. And the reason why we need that is because you can see if we have an ampersand here, ampersand is the indicator that we're starting a special character. So if we want to display the special character that indicates a special character, we need a special character for that. If that's not confusing enough, just know that you need to use an ampersand. You need to display an ampersand AMP semicolon. Okay, that's about it for today. We're approaching the 30-minute mark. So just to recap, in your readings, you have Chapter 2, you have sections 1 through 10, pretty much are the definitions of what we just covered in our slideshow. And then you have your labs. You have 4 labs this week. In another video I'll post later today, I'll explain to you how you can submit your labs. Essentially, you'll be using a similar sandbox to what we're using now. Each lab has its own submission guides and requirements, and we'll walk through the training labs just so you can get a feel for how it works, if you haven't already taken a look ahead. But in the meantime, read through your book, read through your sections, and as always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. And that's about it for today. I'll see you next time.